So Dr. Naresh Motwani is originally from Delhi and now in UK. He is going to give the keynote address on ocular trauma, interactive, comprehensively managing ocular trauma in the era of ophthalmic subspecialization. Yes, welcome, Naresh. How are you? No, they're not displacing. You are in the program. Your microphone has to be on.
लाल बत्ती तो नहीं आई आ गई okay um, thank you Prof Natarajan and thank you to the organizers and most importantly thank you to the audience who have chosen to come to this session instead of so many other sessions ongoing. I was going to say it's my pleasure, but it has been more of a fun for me to come here. A missed flight, missed baggage, finally no suit to wear, but there we go. I'll talk of fun later. So I was looking at English language, keynote speaker. So what keynote speaker does is introduces and sets the theme. That's why I wanted to come first, sir. Engage, entertain, and maybe a bit educational also. So in the fun bit, my micro SD card, so that is educational also for you. The micro SD card was kept next to the phone. And when I put the micro SD card in the computer, it says no files. So here I am with all the complex things, and I was the slides missing. So my talk was supposed to be ocular trauma management, interactive, in era of super specialization. So interactive means if I do something, I want my audience to participate also. Will you? Okay. So the first question, how many colleagues in this hall regularly manage the cases of ocular trauma? Fantastic. Do you think is super specialization in ophthalmology necessary for managing ocular trauma in all cases? Show of hands, yes. No? Just 1, 2, 3, that's all. So minority say you don't, minority say that you don't need the super specialization. Okay, last question, not last, but last for now. How many of us feel that most cases of ocular trauma need to be managed in a center providing super specialist ophthalmic care? Wow, so let's say majority again. Prof, let's start with a bit of monologue. So what is the ocular trauma? The first thing that you can imagine in your head as an ocular trauma case, if I say ocular trauma, anybody wants to tell me? A case. No. अरे यार वो बैडमिंटन खेल रहा था, something like, yeah, okay, come. Oh by God, I have that one, and that slap caused giant retinal tear. All right, okay, anybody else? And what happened to the eye? Okay, anybody else? बड़े सारे हाथ खड़े हुए थे regularly ocular trauma manage करने वाले. Prof ने बताया उससे पहले there was a nail in the eye, etc., etc. So I would like to start, I'm really going basic now because on paper and pencil, you can't do anything more than basic. And I think the basics are very necessary for us to build on the super specialization. So when I say ocular trauma, I see the whole range, closed globe, open globe. When I say ocular trauma, I mean masterly inactivity in one, and on the other end, multi-speciality staged surgical intervention. So, ocular trauma, subcon hemorrhage. Who will do a surgical intervention? Oh my gosh, I've got a unanimous vote. Ocular trauma, slap by the child, inadvertent slap by the child, corneal abrasion. Who will do a surgical intervention? Okay, not as a primary, but as a secondary, I have done a few, because then it becomes recurrent corneal abrasion, then it becomes la 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 la, and then you used to do the needles and now the lasers. So, in all, what I'm trying to say is, when I say comprehensive ocular trauma management, I'm not only looking at the surgical interventions with all the things that Prof was showing just now, and he's fantastic at it. I can't do any of those, but there we go. And one thing I want you to remember always, as I said, a bit educational also. So let's remind you that the eyes are not exclusive. They are housed in a skull, which is connected to the neck. Neck is holding the skull. Head trauma, head injuries are to be ruled out. And a good assessment, only a good assessment, a thorough assessment, will help you to manage a comprehensive patient of ocular trauma. Okay, once again, a show of hands. Do all open globe injuries need surgical intervention? All? No, not all. Okay, so people who've not raised hand, can you give me one example, please? जोर से बोलो, सारे बोलो. Anybody? Do you remember Spitfire pilots? Spitfire pilots were the way forward when the intraocular lenses started having acrylic. Otherwise, it was glass, which was started with sunk intraocular lens, Spitfire pilots, intraocular ocular trauma, no surgical intervention. Okay, and there are many more other examples. So similarly, closed globe injuries, they might need surgical intervention. But most of the closed globe injuries, most don't need at least a primary surgical intervention. But again, assessment, thorough assessment. You think of the patient who I was talking about, the giant retinal tear, did not give history of trauma, social embarrassment, whatever. It was only later on in confidence that the patient said, oh, it was here, the trauma, it wasn't at the eye. Sure. Okay, so let me just come to the fun part of it. I said in the beginning that it was my pleasure, but now it is more like a roller coaster. So I missed my flight. My luggage got delayed. It's all called a snowball effect. And then when the luggage came, I had a bit of other problems. Because I was late by a day, 24-hour flight, the hotel cancelled my room, etc., etc. The same will happen with the ocular management, ocular trauma management. You miss the first bit, you keep going into the spiral. So be prepared. Again, I'm stealing this from, I think it was you who said, game of soccer. Be prepared for surprises. You plan very well, you go in and you suddenly find something else, and know thy limitations. If you know you can't or you might not be able to, get another person who might be able to, but still be prepared for surprises. Okay? Nobody can manage all the cases of ocular trauma, especially the complex and severe ones. I remember a child being bitten by a dog. All I could see was a mangled mess here of tissues dangling. I could not see the eye. And the child was about 4 years old, brought in by grandparents. There was lots of chaos, So the first thing you have to do is take charge and assess the situation, assessment, so that you know whether the eye is involved or not. Okay? So I love to collect coins. It's called numismatist. Did you know that? How many of you knew that? Educational. Wow. At least for some it was educational. So they say husband and wife are two sides of the coin, always live with each other, but never face each other. Well, mostly. So let's look at the other side of this situation, ocular trauma, subspecialization era. So super specialization is very much needed. The expertise and experience of these guys who are super specialty trained is needed. For example, for that child, I debrided the whole thing, but it had to be an oculoplasty trained surgeon who could put the lacrimal cannula, etc., to repair, to make a definitive, and thankfully that child's eye was saved or was not affected. So if super specialization is started in the initial stages of training, that is where the problem is. They don't get to know the basics. And corneal suturing. One of my trainees called me over because he could not suture a cornea. It was a simple, okay, it was a 7 mm corneal perforation, no other extension. It had to be sutured. He could not do it because he'd only done the phacos and the lasers and the. So as trainers, it is for us to remember that all these trainees, we have to go back to basics. Human first, doctor next, and ophthalmologist next, super specialist next. If we forget this simple rule of going step by step, we will get unstuck one fine day. I had lots of examples on the slides. Glaucoma, there was a case where cricket ball went through the helmet grill, ciliary body detachment, tried to manage medically, hypotony continued, and it had to be, the ciliary body needed to be sutured, needed a glaucoma expert who was expert in doing that. Or the slap in the face, needed a vitreoretinal surgeon. There was a badminton player who came to us, orbital blowout, sunken globe, trapped inferior rectus. I couldn't have done it. So there we are, guys. I've got lots of other examples, and there were lots of lovely slides, but I hope it was a bit educational, and that is going to be the theme of the coming talks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Naresh. I always enjoy, and I'm glad you managed your talk by educating us. Thank you very much. We learned every time we learn something from somebody.